Hello, well, it's yet another new year, my dear followers on YouTube, and I am simultaneously optimistic and scared to death at the same time at the direction that our great nation in particular is going and the world at large. Hello, everyone. You've tuned in to the first edition of The Patriot Preacher this year. I am Charles Wells, and I am The Patriot Preacher, here to disseminate reason and logic and share with you my thoughts on where we stand in the evolution of freedom in this world. Is it indeed getting more free as we proceed into 2022, or are we in fact going down the rabbit hole of outright tyranny? Now, to understand the direction we're going, you first have to understand some of the very basic principles and facts. First and foremost, freedom is a delicacy in the history of our world. It is in fact a fleeting and delicate commodity, to say the least. In fact, until the United States of America was willed into existence by some extraordinarily forward-thinking individuals called our forefathers, the world was steeped in tyranny and oppression from one end of the earth to the other. It was a natural state of affairs. Why? Because there's an unholy tendency of people in power to want more power. Even in our own nation, it took a couple of hundred years to fully realize the concept of equality and the value of the individual. For the first time, individual freedom was valued over what our communal overlords would have us believe is best for us. Now, I don't know how many of you have heard of what is being called the Great Reset. Some of you may have heard the term but don't really know what it is. Some of you probably have already been convinced that this is indeed what the world needs to make everything work properly and to make everything fair. And of course, there are many of us that are holding up our red flags as high as we can, trying to warn everyone that this will, in fact, culminate in the end of freedom and individuality as we know it. You know, it's funny how the people who already have all the power and money seem to think they know what is best for all the rest of us at the bottom. This is really no different than any of the other great empires of Earth attempting to consolidate all power into one pedestal from which all of humanity was to be ruled from. All those attempts failed, of course, because deep down inside, people do not want to be ruled. They have but one life, and they want to own it for themselves. Basically, the goal for the Great Reset is for no one to really own anything and to be happy about it. It is the end of private property. Of course, that's not entirely true. If we don't own anything, then we, of course, have no say in what is given to us. Who then will make the rules? After all, whoever makes the rules does own everything. This is the final push to centralize all decision-making of the world into one conglomeration of government and big corporations. So you might ask yourself, could this be so bad? Wouldn't that get rid of poverty since we would redistribute wealth? Wouldn't it be a fair place where racism and sexism and all the other isms are outlawed? The problem, folks, is that we are all imperfect creatures, and we are all vastly different in our perspectives. Because of that, there will never be a perfect system devised by mankind. There will never be a fair system invented by human beings. It is quite literally impossible. Rather, it would be a formulation of rules and laws that fully supports the decisions of those who already have all the power and money. In other words, it would be a turning back of the clock to what we were in medieval times, but with the might and power of technology being our shackles, with a grip that iron shackles could never compete with. And the way this is being accomplished is very simple. The powers that be create problems so vast they can never be solved by individuals. That's what global climate change was and is. That is what this global pandemic is all about. If you can successfully convince enough people that the only way that they can survive as a species is for them to hand over their precious freedoms and control to a centralized authority, then you have it made. That is why these folks hand down such dire predictions all the time for our global future. How many times have we been told now over the last 50, 60 years that global climate change will end the earth as we know it in 10 to 12 years with nothing scientifically concrete to back up their claims that a high school debate team couldn't dismantle? Climate change is a tool to exact compliance from the masses. And now we have a pandemic on our hands that is serving the same purpose. In both cases, fear has been implanted in the hearts and minds of the populace. We are told that only our almighty government can conquer this virus when the same government had a hand in crafting it. They are also creating a financial crisis of monumental proportions, folks, by spending trillions of dollars that we don't have and trying to convince us that it's all under control, when anyone who has even had the most rudimentary of financial training or education understands that what they are doing is unsustainable and is the direct cause of the incredible inflation that we're beginning to witness right now. Our illustrious leaders don't even have the decency to pass a budget anymore, just a series of continuing resolutions. Why? Well, there's two reasons really. You have two categories of people who are now in charge. One category of this leadership is actively working toward a great reset, which requires what we have now, which is individual freedoms and free markets, to fail. And they intend to do everything in their power to ensure that failure by whatever means is necessary. When our monetary system fails, a new digital currency is envisioned to take its place. And in doing so, every transaction, large and small, will not go unnoticed or untracked by the powers that be. They will discern then what kind of transactions will be permissible, how much, and by who. Talk about ultimate control. The other category of our leaders are simply selfish people whose theories of governing has absolutely no basis in reality or real life. They are basically the useful idiots, as I call them, for the people in the first category, which are the true leaders of the world, and their only concern is their personal grip on whatever power they possess at the time. They, of course, have nothing to worry about, since the real movers and shakers will, of course, award them appropriately and abundantly for their servitude. And, of course, the final piece of the puzzle is the elimination of Christianity from public discourse. People in power want us to seek answers from them, not God. They want to be God. And for anyone who has had the desire or inclination to understand revelations in the Bible, understands completely where all of this is heading to. One world order is a real concept, which of course is the ultimate destination of using crises, real and manufactured, to cause the Great Reset, to rebuild from the ground up a new and improved society as imagined by the global elitists of the world. But naturally, the boundaries which we will have to honor and obey will not apply to them, of course. Rules aren't for the enslaved. They are for the slaved, not the enslavers. Boundaries are for the common folks, not the enlightened ones. When they have us truly locked down is when people will be chipped and marked. Your medical history, financial transactions, everywhere you've been or are planning to go will be known in an instant. For those of you who have fell into the trap of believing that socialism is a noble concept, you will get exactly what you wanted. You want equality? You'll get equality. With the exception of our nobility, we will all be equally poor, equally silent, and equally disposable. Now, if you believe for one moment that this is impossible, just look at how Google is aiding communist China in controlling its people. In an extreme contradiction because of its desire to get into a huge market, China, with 700 million users with a huge advertising dollars at stake, Google is actively and knowingly helping the communist Chinese government basically censor what its citizens see, restrict their free speech, and track every individual to enable the government to easily track down and possibly arrest those who search for information that is banned by the government. But that's not the only reasons Google's foray into China is so disastrous. The company would be placing its people and its assets at huge risk by putting its future in the hands of the Chinese government. The record shows that this rarely works out well. The truth is, folks, that the United States tech giants are actively helping to build China's surveillance state. And if you think for one moment that's where it's going to end, you are being incredibly naive. Greed and the thirst for power knows no boundaries. When this nation catastrophically fails financially to the point where money means nothing, when every social net cannot be afforded from Social Security to Medicaid, Medicare, welfare gone, food stamps gone, supply chain interrupted for a lot more than they are now, people are going to be desperate. So much so that they will willingly give over their freedoms to these people who in fact created the crises to begin with. Folks, we are in trouble. With every fiber of our beings, we must fight to remain informed and to vote out anyone who espouses globalism, climate change, racial unrest, or anything else that will take down the greatest republic to have ever existed. We cannot cede our freedoms for any reason or for any crisis, to include this pandemic that we are going through right now. As the great Benjamin Franklin once noted to have said, those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. Stop believing what they promise, folks. They cannot build anything back better. They can't control the climate. They can't stop a pandemic. They can't stop racism. They can't run a popcorn stand without it costing $1 million and only having one flavor. Stand up for freedom in all forms that it takes. Stand beside those who believe that our freedoms stands firmly above any needs we think we have. And finally, remain resolute in your belief that God still rules this universe. And with that knowledge, we will have the opportunity to maintain what is God-given and not allow human leaders to take away what doesn't belong to them in the first place. In the end, when all else fails, we will lean on God because we will have nothing. And as the old saying goes, you don't know God is all you need until God is all you have. Well, I have pontificated enough for one video. I hope you're on the same page as me. I would love to discuss this and other matters with my listeners and with those who would even disagree with me. If you've enjoyed our little foray into the infringement of our freedoms, please take the time to share this video, to make cogent comments, get notifications, and ultimately become a loyal listener by hitting that little subscribe button in the bottom right-hand corner. Until next time, I hope you and your families are well, goodbye, and God bless.